Oh boy, it's Shining Force. For being the Shining Force guy, it's a little bit grievous and inconsiderate that I don't have a video on the original Shining Force on this channel. So here I am correcting this absolute barbarity of insults. I have replayed Shining Force for the 22nd time, so I can regale you all with my deepest and most intimate feelings of my 4th favorite game of all time? 5th favorite? 3rd favorite? Let me tell you, number 1 and number 2 are locked in, but entries 3 through 10 get moved around more than Max's inventory. Shining Force was an important release not only for Sega, but for RPGs as a genre. Nowadays, people are quick to shout Fire Emblem when they think about tactics RPGs, but at least for the Western world, Shining Force hit harder and earlier a whole decade before we even knew what a Fire Emblem was. And Shining Force still deserves praise here in 2024. It is a vastly different game than Fire Emblem. It scratches an itch that Fire Emblem just can't scratch. It's the Coke to Fire Emblem's Pepsi. And despite there not being a real Shining Force game since 1998, there is still a large, thriving fan base online. The people want a new Shining Force, and we will not be happy until Sega relents and gives us one. There are dozens of us, etc., you know the quote. So we are gonna get our short swords and power water and get deep into this beloved old school tactics game. We're going to talk about how this is the second game in the Shining series. We are going to talk about how this is Sega's second tactics RPG. We are going to talk about the development of this game, and we are going to talk about Jogurt the Yogurt. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between and beyond, I'm Richard for RPG Fortress, and this is Shining Force. Hit the intro. The Sega Genesis, also known as the Mega Drive in just about every other territory. A 16-bit home video game console. The system was released in Japan in 1988, North America in 1989, and in other territories throughout the early 90s. The system ended up being very popular and brought hot arcade action to many homes. With the introduction of Sonic the Hedgehog in 1991, the Genesis was cemented as a platform for action gamers all across the planet. People, for some reason, still love Sonic the Hedgehog today, but some video gamists of the time would cry out for nerdier fare, games with numbers, and words, and swords, and sorcery. It's no secret that Sega's RPG output of the 90s was nowhere near as prolific as Nintendo's. Combining all of the RPGs for the Genesis, Game Gear, Master System, Saturn, and Dreamcast into one big pool of games, Sega still doesn't surpass the amount of RPGs released for just the Super Nintendo alone. But Sega did end up releasing some really great RPGs. Quality over quantity, I guess. Sega released a dungeon crawler RPG called Shining in the Darkness for the Mega Drive/Genesis in March 1991. The game was developed by Climax Entertainment, and it was a cult hit. RPGs were decently successful in Japan, but decidedly less so in English-speaking territories. So the fact that this plucky little first-person quest was a moderate success meant that Sega had to swoop in ASAP with a sequel. Let me tell you about Sega's first tactics RPG, the immense and spectacular Shining Crystal Warriors for the Game Gear. This bite-sized SRPG was released in 1991 for Sega's very own Game Gear. Crystal Warriors is a decent if bizarre little title that didn't garner much attention in English-speaking territories, although it did receive a sequel, Royal Stone, for the Game Gear in Japan. Okay, so in March 1992, Sega finally released Shining Force. The game was developed by Sega CD4, later named Sonic Software Planning, and even later named Camelot Software Planning. Climax Entertainment, who worked on Shining in the Darkness, also helped bring the game to life. This leads to a lot of shared aesthetics between the two games. Shining Force was another successful game and spawned its own sequels. So the Shining Force games belong to the Shining Force series and the Shining series, but there are also Shining games that belong to the Shining series, but not necessarily to the Shining Force series. Yes, it's weird, but just don't overthink it, it's fine. Let's talk about this game's story. Shining Force's story is one that is pretty familiar to a lot of fantasy works. It's the battle of good versus evil with very little nuance. You are Max, a young warrior in the kingdom of Guardiana in the land of Rune. There is an evil force called Runefaust who are trying to revive an ancient evil called Dark Dragon, and you have to stop them. The story is very Saturday morning cartoon / anime-esque. I mean, this is literally a light versus darkness narrative. The Shining Force is a group of plucky youths out to stop a literal evil dragon. The only gray areas of the story are a couple of villains who repent after you beat them, only for the big bad Darksaul to murder them in front of you. So, the story is a bit of a bust, but what about the characters? Well, it's a tactics game, and it's an old game, so that's 2 strikes immediately. Tactics games, with their huge rosters of characters, are known for skimping out on character personalities. A lot of games treat your units as nameless, faceless units sent out to be splatted by enemy forces. And old games aren't known for deep and heady writing. The characters in Shining Force are fun. They're not deep, but they are fun. There's not a lot of dialogue. They usually just join you and then don't say a single word for the rest of the game. But these characters still have a lot of personality. Character and monster designs were created by the late and great Yoshitaka Tamaki. And let me tell you, what Shining Force lacks in hard-hitting narrative and dialogue, it more than makes up with character designs. The world of Shining Force is a world of old-school Dungeons & Dragons-inspired fantasy. Swordsmen, elves, goblins, centaurs, battle axes, spells, talking gophers and flight helmets. The world of Shining Force is very Lodos War, Delicious in Dungeon, or Baldur's Gate. On top of this, the game world is also home to the ancient civilization with incredible technology trope. This game also has robots, laser cannons, 4-armed cyborg skeletons with 2 battle axes and a machine gun, and so much more. So all in all, what Shining Force lacks in deep storytelling and complex characters, it more than makes up with interesting character designs and world building. The blend of sword, sorcery, and subtle sci-fi is very unique. The ancient technology is slowly introduced throughout the game. You start off in a very D&D style world. Then you meet a steampunk armadillo knight. Then you meet a flying machine backpack knight. Then you fight a giant laser tank. Then you are fighting waves and waves of flying robots with laser cannons. I absolutely love this world. Let me tell you why I love Shining Force more than Fire Emblem. Sorry, I know this is going to make a lot of people angry, so I'll just say it up front. I love Fire Emblem. I have played every single English language Fire Emblem, and I have finished every single English language Fire Emblem. Except for Radiant Dawn, because I soft-walked myself in the second-to-last battle. Oops. Fire Emblem and Shining Force are very different. Yes, they are both SRPGs. Yes, they both have loads of units. Yes, they both have similar mechanics, but Fire Emblem is a lot more hardcore than Shining Force. Especially the older ones. Permanent death? Why can't I just egress and resurrect my fallen units at the church? Well, Fire Emblem is more hardcore than Shining Force, which is fine, but I like Shining Force and how simple it is. The secret sauce with Shining Force is how easy it is to just jump in and play. You have all the hallmarks of traditional RPGs like leveling up, equipment, healing items, spells, MP, towns, hidden characters, etc., etc. But the thing that binds it all together is how accessible it all is. You can just start it up and run right into a battle and start smashing goblins. Sometimes there'll be a bit of story first, but that's really it. There's also no filler bogging you down. The last couple of Fire Emblems have had a lot of superfluous fluff that just drag them down. Tea parties, swimming, meals, working out, etc. I spent half of my game time in FE Engage in the Somnium, faffing about. Halfway through the game, I just abandoned all of that so that I could just get to the battles and story segments that much quicker. Shining Force is so much more easier to get into. There's no lengthy tutorials, no overreaching subplots, no tiring mini-games, just a fast-paced and easy-to-access SRPG. And like I said, I don't want it to sound like I'm shitting on Fire Emblem. I do really love those games, but Shining Force is just a very different experience. It's like Mario World and Sonic 2. Both are very different, but both are very fun. Now let me tell you about the combat in Shining Force. Let me tell you what it does for me. The game is overhead just like most RPGs of the time, but whenever you engage an enemy in combat, the screen transitions to this behind-the-back attack sequence with these giant sprites. Now, this is 1992 on the Genesis. These sprites were massive for the time, and they do a great job of showing off Yoshitaka Tamiki's art style. I still remember my mom remarking to an 11-year-old me, "Wow, that looks just like a cartoon." Yes, I have my +5 nostalgia goggles equipped, but the graphics were truly something else at the time. Combat was and is just so smooth. Just jump in, move your dudes, smash the bad guys, cast a spell, use a medical herb if you need to, cast egress to go back to town. It's just all very simple and to the point. The cursor is a little bit slow, sure, 100%. It could definitely use a bit of a boost, maybe 50% quicker, get it from enemy to enemy a lot faster, but everything else just works. There's no fucking around, you get your dude and you move him. The game isn't very hard, and the AI only really has 2 modes. Smash the nearest unit, or stand around and die from arrows. But some bosses can be pretty tough due to big spells and insane healing factor. Thankfully, you can grind some experience if you need to. Your lead dude Max has a spell called Egress. This spell will warp you out of battle and back to town, where you can buy healing supplies and resurrect your dead party members. You can then start the battle over, grind some goblins, level up a little bit, and then rush the boss. Let me tell you, fighting Michaela is always a ball ache due to bottlenecking, her insane healing factor, and access to Bolt level 2, which can potentially hit all of your dudes for a lot of damage. So, like I said, you are able to take 12 units into battle with you at a time. This leads to loads and loads of replay, as each time you play, you can just sub in different units. And Shining Force has 30 units that you can recruit, and we are going to discuss all of them in order they join right now, right here, lightning round style. Max, your default character, decent all-rounder, has egress so you can get out of battle fast. The only unit that you need to have in your party. Luke, dwarf fighter, very strong melee unit, I always use him. Ken, centaur knight, can use lances and spears. Spears make him a sometimes ranged fighter. Loads of HP, strength and defense not so great. The first of 7 centaur knights. Tau. Yo, it's the mascot of the channel. Your first mage, she specializes in Blaze, the weakest of the attack spells, but it's very affordable to cast with level 4 only costing 8 MP. This, along with a very high speed rating, means you have someone who can consistently cause damage to enemies, even those with high defense. A mainstay in my parties, but you may prefer Anri. Hans, the first of 2 archers, the first of 2 bad archers. His attack, defense, and HP are all pretty low. It takes a lot of time to make him passable, and it's almost never worth it. Lo, a decent healer, but there are better healers, and what's better than a healer is 3 healing seeds in your inventory. Gong, a monk, a kind of hybrid fighter healer that excels at neither. Always my first to get kicked, yes, even before Hans. Gort, your second dwarf fighter, and just as good as Luke. I say use both of them. May, centaur knight, very high defense and decent strength, not a bad unit at all. Chris, healer, she's okay. Anri, another mainstay in my party. Your second mage, less speed than Tau, but she has access to Freeze level 4, which has a bit more range, is a bit stronger, but costs a bit more than Blaze 4. Arthur. Arthur is a legendary unit. Starts off very bad. Can get good after a lot of work. also learns some low-level magic spells. Very unique unit, but I've only ever used him once. Balbaroi, your first of 2 Birdmen fighters. Birdmen are sword users who have the added bonus of flying. This gives them a lot more control during battle, but unfortunately their strength isn't very high and their defense is even lower. I never use either of the Birdmen, but you will see a lot of speedrunners using Balbaroi, so what the fuck do I know? Eamon, Balbaroi's wife and your second Birdman. She's even weaker than Balbaroi. Diane, your second archer. A little bit better than Hans, but still pretty bad. Xylo, legendary. Xylo is a powerful and fast werewolf fighter. He doesn't use a weapon, but he is really powerful, plus he excels at moving through forest tiles. His power does drop off a little bit by the end of the game, but he's still a powerful and cool as shit character who is almost always in my team. Pele, probably the best of all the Centaur Knights. Powerful, good defense, good HP, you cannot go wrong with Pele. Jogurt, a very silly character. A gopher in a jet fighter helmet, level 1, 1 HP, 1 strength, 1 defense, 1 speed. If he ever gets to level up, he goes back to level 1 and gains no stats. His one saving grace is that if you do somehow manage to kill a unit with him, he gains a yogurt ring. You can equip this on any unit to make them look just like Jogurt. So you can hypothetically have 12 Jogurts on your team. Holy shit. Kokichi, one of my favorite units and secretly probably the best unit in the game. He is a Sky Knight. He's a lance user, but he also has a steampunk backpack that lets him fly around. Equip him with a spear, and he becomes one of your most flexible units. Plus, he's decently strong, has good defense, and he's pretty fast. He's always in my team. Vankar, yet another Centaur Knight. He's not bad, but by the time he joins you, you already have May and Pele, so why really bother? Gunts, another legendary unit. He's a steampunk armadillo knight. How cool is that? Very cool and very silly. He uses lances, so he's another knight, basically. I usually eschew the Centaur Knights for Kokichi and or Gunts. Ernest, hey, it's another Centaur Knight. But thankfully, he's the last Centaur Knight. Once again, he's a pretty good unit, but we are way over Centaur Knights by this stage of the game. Domingo, another legendary unit. He's this little flying magical squid thing. Cthulhu? Dude has really good defense for a magic user, and he can learn Freeze level 4. His only real downside is that his flight isn't quite as good as other flying units. He can fly over rivers and other small obstacles, but any high mountains he can't cross, so I guess he floats? Still, with Freeze level 4, his ability to move around the map where other mages cannot, and a really good defense, he's a really good unit to bring along. Lyle, he's a centaur with a bazooka. He joins really late though. He can be a decent unit, but he is so underpowered by the time you get him, he's very easily left behind. Blue, speaking of being underpowered when you get them, Blue is a dragon and very, very underpowered. By the time you get him, all of your units are probably promoted and have several levels under their belts. It takes a lot of time to level him up to being a good unit. He is indeed pretty powerful when you do get him there, and he's another flying unit with great defense, but man, it is a lot of work. Musashi, a fucking samurai killing machine. Dude has very limited movement, but hits like a freight train right out of the gate. Easily one of the best units in the game, just chuck the running ring on him and he's near perfect. Torasu, the best healer in the game, but also joins unpromoted very late. His Aura level 4 spell, when he finally learns it, acts like the healing rain item, healing all units wherever they are to full health. It's very helpful, but once again, he is a unit that you need to put a lot of effort into. A lot of people hate grinding, so if you hate grinding, you're probably not going to use Tarasu. Aleph, maybe the best mage in the entire game. She specializes in the Bolt spell. Bolt 1 hits 3x3, Bolts 2 and 3 hit 5x5, and Bolt 4, while only hitting one single solitary space, can hit any unit for upwards of 75 damage. A lot of late game enemies can either dodge most attacks or have so many hit points you will essentially be attacking a wall. Bolt 4 can obliterate most enemies very fast. That being said, she also suffers from joining unpromoted very late in the game, so she needs a lot of babysitting to get good. But if you like grinding and you want probably the best mage in the game, she is a must-have. Or just do what I do and take all 4 mages every time you play. Adam, the community's least favorite robot boy. Adam joins very, very late into the game. 2 battles from the end of the penultimate chapter. He is unpromoted and low level. He has no attack, no defense, no HP, and very bad movement. But he's a fun robot and he shoots lasers. He has a secret attack that literally will shoot a laser from his arm. That's fun. But in order to get him to be strong, you're gonna have to raise him to pretty much the maximum level of 20 and then promote him, and then get another 10 to 15 levels on top of him. Even as someone who loves leveling characters to God tier, this is a big ask. It's a lot of work. Is he worth it? Probably not, but if you do level him up and you give him the running ring, he's a pretty good tank. Hanzo. He's a ninja. He hits hard and he gets some great magic like Soul and Shield. He joins right at the start of the final chapter, but he's good right out of the gate. I usually use him because I'm a sucker for ninjas. So those are your units. It's a pretty cool list of characters, and there's a lot that can be done with them. Yes, there is an overabundance of knights and lance users, and there's a handful of idiots who join unpromoted very weak at the end of the game, but all in all, you can do some crazy things with these guys. One of my favorite things about the tactical aspects of Shining Force is how turns are taken. You will find in a lot of tactics RPGs, you and the enemies take turns doing things. All of your guys go, then all of the enemies' units go. This is pretty fairly standard. I'm not really a huge fan of this because a wave of enemies can very easily overwhelm you in these scenarios. But in Shining Force, you have an agility stat, so all of your units and enemy units will take turns in tandem. Whatever unit is fastest will go first, whether it's your unit or the enemy's unit, and the next unit may be another one of your units or another enemy unit. I think that this is a much better way of doing things than the whole all enemy units go, then all your units go. Makes it feel a bit more like standard turn-based RPGs. Okay, people hate it when I'm too positive about games, so here's Richard's big bad pile of things I hate about one of my favorite games of all time. The AI is dumb. Like I mentioned earlier, the AI is basically 2 modes. Just rush at your nearest dude, and stand there and get hit. This issue makes a couple of battles really annoying. A couple of bosses, just stand there. You can range attack them into oblivion. Unless they have a big spell, you can just overwhelm them without taking a single point of damage. The terrain effect is broken. The terrain effect is supposed to give you a penalty to your movement and a bonus to your defense. Well, guess what? It definitely gives you a penalty to your movement, just look at any forest battle, but it does not give you any defense bonus. This is a bug that was never fixed. Promoting your units can decrease your stats. Promotion or class change in SRPGs is fucking great. Transforming from a weakling into a battle-hardened mercenary after earning enough experience is a staple in strategy RPGs. But when you promote your dudes in Shining Force, a lot of the time you're going to lose stats. Like, a lot of stats. Then again, stat increases at level up in this game are always going to be goofy. Anytime one of my dudes gets plus 10 to a stat, I feel like I'm cheating. Late game weaklings. All of those units that join in the last 2 chapters that are just so weak. Adam, Blue, Aleph, Tarasu. It is so difficult to level up any of these characters. On a casual playthrough, you'll probably just skip them. It sucks though because I always want to use Blue and Aleph. Stat up items. Stat up items like Cheerful Bread, Power Potion, and Legs of Haste only raise their related stat by 1 or 2 points. These are not really that noticeable at all. Also, the best of the best, the Turbo Pepper, which increases movement range, can have its effect negated if you use it on someone who is not promoted and then promote them. And there is only one of these in the game. Super lame. Localization issues. Legs of Haste. I said that up there. Legs of Haste confused me for a long time until I realized that the sprite is that of roasted chicken legs. Oh, they're chicken legs that increase your agility. Legs of Haste. I get it. Plus, there are a couple of other really weird translation errors in the game, and the localization completely left out the fact that Kane is Max's brother. Give me a break. Short soundtrack. This game has a very small and short soundtrack. There's only like 3 battle themes, not counting the final battle. Hope you like doot doo, doot doo doot doo, because you're going to be hearing it a lot. It's old. 1992 is 45 years ago! So that's Shining Force, an old tactics game for a game system that doesn't exist anymore. But it's still good. You can play it right now. Illegally, and also legally. This is one of those games that Sega pretends doesn't exist unless they're releasing a crusty old Mega Drive collection. Then you can 1000% find this game in its roster. It's on Steam right now for like $1 Canadian. That's basically free in any other currency. But can you play this game in 2024 and actually enjoy it? Is this game too old and too janky and too fucked up to play in 2024? Some old games are a real big hassle to try and play in 2024. Ogre Battle? A little bit crusty. Dark Wizard? A little bit crusty. Crystal Warriors? A little bit crusty. Shining Force? Yeah, it's still good. I mean, yeah, it's a Genesis game from 1992. It's definitely a little bit rough around the edges, but you can boot it up and you can play it and you can have fun. Shining Force had a number of sequels, including 3 Game Gear games: Shining Force Gaiden, Shining Force Gaiden 2: The Sword of Hajijabajaba, Shining Force Gaiden 3: Final Conflict, a Sega CD game, Shining Force CD, a proper sequel on the Genesis, Shining Force 2, and then Shining Force 3 on the Saturn, which is basically 3 different games. After this, Camelot went on to do the Golden Sun games, invent Waluigi, and have since been condemned to the Mario Sports mines, creating non-RPG after non-RPG for the Taskmasters at Nintendo. Sega continued using the Shining name for a little bit longer, releasing several games of dubious quality, but there was never a proper Shining Force ever again. And Hiroyuki Takahashi said that he would love to do a new Shining Force game if Sega let him. He said this in 2017, 7 years ago. Sega! There was also going to be a phone game called Shining Force Heroes of Light and Darkness. This looked like it was going to be a gacha game, and okay, chill out, I know it took you $300 and 400 hours to get your Astolfo. It looked okay. The designs were fun, it had an original story, and it had characters from Shining Force 2, and Shining Force CD, but it was cancelled. Sega! Like, come on, you fucking bastards. Give us a new Shining Force, or a proper collection. Remasters of Shining Force 3, Scenario 2, and 3 never even came out in English. Fans had to translate it, just like fans had to translate Final Conflict. It is very cool and very awesome that Shining Force and Shining Force 2 and Shining in the Darkness are on like every single Sega collection out there, but man, this series is languishing. Sega, you can stop the languishing. Stop it, you bastards. Shining Force is awesome. Please play it. My name is Richard. I talk a lot about this crusty old man series for old men. You can find many more videos on Shining Force on this channel. Thank you for watching RPG Fortress. I end my videos by saying don't forget to hug a cat because I like cats. So hug a cat. See you in the tactical role-playing game Depression Zone.